The courtroom was not a place for children. Its walls, tall and gray, seemed to swallow sound, and the heavy wooden benches creaked under the weight of fear and judgment. The people gathered that morning whispered among themselves, but all went silent when they saw him, an 8-year-old black boy, dressed in a too large shirt and second-hand shoes, stepping nervously toward the witness stand. His name was Malik Jameson. He was there not because he wanted to be, but because life had cornered him with cruelty. His father, a man who had worked double shifts to put food on their table, had been wrongfully accused of a crime. With no money for a proper lawyer, his case was faltering. Malik, too young to carry such burdens, had spent nights reading borrowed law books under the dim light of a broken lamp, and somehow, in that fragile body of his, intelligence burned like fire. Malik's childhood had never been easy. His mother passed away when he was only 5, leaving his father Darius to raise him alone. Darius worked long hours as a janitor, his hands roughened by chemicals, his back bent from exhaustion. But Malik remembered the gentle strength in those hands. They tied his shoelaces, helped him with homework, and brushed tears from his cheeks. They lived in a neighborhood where opportunity was scarce and suspicion was plentiful. The police patrolled constantly, but protection rarely followed. One evening, after work, Darius was arrested. A store had been robbed, and a man fitting his description was blamed. The evidence was weak, but prejudice was strong. Malik watched through the bars of the holding cell as his father tried to reassure him. "Stay strong, son. Trust the truth." But the truth, Malik was learning, often had no voice of its own. On the day of the trial, the courtroom buzzed with expectation. The prosecutor smirked with confidence, armed with flimsy witness statements and circumstantial evidence. Darius's court-appointed lawyer sat slumped, offering little fight. But then Malik, small and trembling, raised his hand. "Your Honor," he said in a voice both fragile and steady. "May I speak?" The judge, an old man with silver hair, frowned. "This is highly irregular. You're a child." "Yes, sir," Malik replied, his dark eyes unblinking. "But I've studied the case. I know things that haven't been said." The courtroom gasped. The jury shifted, curious. The judge hesitated, then finally nodded. "Proceed, young man." "But Bibri." Malik stepped onto the witness stand, his feet barely reaching the floor. He held a small notebook, its pages covered in handwriting, far too advanced for a boy his age. He began slowly, his voice growing stronger with every word. "First, the robbery took place at 8:15 p.m. The witness said the man ran out of the store and across Maple Avenue, but my father was at work until 9. I checked his time card. ALD'd up the inked punch marks plain for all to see. The second witness said the suspect had a scar above his eyebrow. My father doesn't have one. I asked the officer why this wasn't in the report. He didn't answer. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. The jury leaned forward. Malik continued, flipping through his notes with the precision of a seasoned attorney. "And the security camera. It was broken, but the store log shows it had been serviced just 2 days before. Why would a brand new repair fail so quickly?" His words hung in the air, sharp as glass. The courtroom was stunned. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Young man, how did you come by this information?" Malik's voice soft. "I went to the library. I read books about law. I asked questions. I listened when the lawyers talked, even when they thought I wasn't listening." His small hands trembled as he clutched the notebook. "Aide tu. Because if I didn't, no one would help my dad." The silence was heavy. Even the prosecutor could not hide his discomfort. A woman on the jury dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A man shook his head in disbelief, muttering, "That boy, he's smarter than half the lawyers I've seen." For a moment it seemed like Malik's brilliance might save his father. The truth, so carefully gathered by a child who should have been playing games instead of studying law, shone too brightly to be ignored. The judge cleared his throat. "We will reassess to consider this testimony." That night, Malik sat in the small county motel where he and his father's lawyer were staying. His notebook lay open, his pencil still moving. He dreamed of walking into court the next day and hearing the judge dismiss the charges. He dreamed of going home with his father, back to their tiny apartment, back to evenings of laughter and cornbread suppers. But reality is often crueler than dreams. The next morning, the prosecution doubled down. They argued that Malik's evidence was inadmissible, that a child could not possibly understand the complexity of legal standards. They waved away his findings as cute but irrelevant. The judge, torn between admiration and the rigid chains of procedure, ultimately allowed the case to continue. The jury, though moved, was instructed to consider only admissible evidence. When the verdict was read, Malik's world collapsed. Guilty. The word echoed like a hammer strike. His father bowed his head, tears sliding down his face. Malik clutched his notebook, his body shaking. He wanted to scream, to shout the truth, but his voice was drowned beneath the machinery of a system that did not bend for boys like him. Before being led away, Darius knelt before his son. His wrists were bound in chains, but his eyes were gentle. "You did more for me than anyone else ever has," he whispered. "I'm proud of you, Malik. Never forget that." Malik pressed his face into his father's chest, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I tried. I really tried." "I know you did," Darius murmured. "You're my little lawyer. Don't stop fighting for the truth." Then he was taken away. After the trial, Malik's story spread quietly. An 8-year-old who stunned a courtroom with his brilliance. Some called him a prodigy. Others said it was tragic, a child forced to shoulder burdens no child should ever know. He went back to his neighborhood, to his empty apartment, clutching his notebook like a lifeline. Each night, he kept reading, learning, writing. But the laughter was gone, the warmth of his father replaced by silence. Neighbors sometimes saw him sitting on the stoop, staring off into the distance, with eyes far too old for his age. A boy who should have been playing ball in the street was instead memorizing legal codes, desperate to one day bring his father home. Years later, Malik would grow into the lawyer his father had called him. His mind, sharpened by pain and persistence, became a weapon against injustice. But the scars of that childhood never faded. People remembered the boy who had once stood in a courtroom and shaken a jury to its core. They remembered his small voice, carrying truths too heavy for his age. And though he would go on to free others, he could never erase the memory of the day. He could not free his own father.